Hello creatures, welcome back to Bound by Words. My name is Madie and today we are starting a new series. I'm very excited about it. We are going to be talking about books that we loved in high school and authors we loved in high school, and we're going to be rereading and reliving them to see if they hold up to their original clout, to see if we love them just as much as writers and as adults as we did whenever we were young and in love with them.
Baby, open up to
Alright, before we start talking about our first series that we are going to reread, I want to talk a little bit about the why and the how we are doing this. And the why is pretty simple. So whenever I started to learn how to write, I became instantly critical of the books that I was reading. I was able to point out elements I didn't like a lot quicker, and I was able to give them a name, which is a way to sort of work it under your skin. So if you're reading a book and it doesn't have amazing dialogue and you don't know why it doesn't have amazing dialogue, it's not as bothersome as if you do, because then every time you see that problem that you don't like, it really nags at you and wears you down. So I had the thought, after I had read a couple writing books, I picked up a novel that I bought a while ago and that sounded extremely interesting, and I just never had gotten around to reading it. And as I was reading it, I honestly hated it. I got to 80 pages and then I quit because there was so much info dumping. There was so much telling instead of showing. I didn't feel emotionally attached to any of the characters, and the dialogue was super scripted, and I was able to point out these things and give them names, and it changed my entire view of the story. So I figured that a lot of writers probably have the same occurrence. You probably learn how to be a better writer, and then you start to find flaws in your favorite books. So I have a lot of books in this house, and a lot of the books that I do have, I bought in high school whenever I didn't have bills to pay, which was pretty awesome, and I miss those times. But I have these vivid memories of reading and loving and being super captivated by stories, and I'm wondering if I will also be as captivated now if I reread them. So I have been out of high school for 6 years now. A lot of these books I've read somewhere in the 6 to 10 year range, and a lot of them I have memories of when I read them, memories of enjoying them, and I don't remember a lot of the details. I don't know if that's normal or not. My memory's pretty bad, so I feel like I could read a book and then 2 to 3 years later I probably forget the nitty-gritty, unless it's common talked about story, you're never going to forget the details of Harry Potter. But for this particular series by Carrie Jones, it starts with the Need book, and then next is the Captivate, and there is a third book called Entice, which I never actually read. I read these two together because they were published whenever I picked up the first one, and then I never went back to that third one. So I plan on rereading this book series to see if I loved it just as much as I did whenever I was in high school. Now, before I reread these books, I want to let you guys know that the only thing I remember is the general attitude of the protagonist, and I remember really enjoying the love interest. I know that there are fairy elements and fantasy elements in that it has a real world setting, but then it shifts to a fantasy setting, and Flurry's peeking his little ears in the video. So I don't remember a whole lot about them, and it has been a really long time since I've read them, and I also feel like these aren't very popular titles. So the rest of this video is going to be kind of vlog style. I'm going to be reading and tracking the parts that I absolutely love, where I'm lost in the story, the parts where maybe the writing takes me out of it a little bit, the parts where I really don't like the characters' decisions or attitudes, and the parts where I just can't not turn the page. Stuff like that. Now, I was originally going to be using Post-it notes for this system. I was going to have Post-it notes big enough to write on, and I was going to write where and why I had a problem with, or I love the writing. But in my last fairy loot box, I got these emoji stickers, and I actually, whenever I opened it, thought they were kind of dumb. I'm not gonna lie. When you get a subscription box every month, I feel like you have 1 or 2 items where you look at it and you're like, that's cool, but I'm not going to use it. Or that's cute, but no. So whenever I pulled this item out of my box, this immediately became my that's cute, but I'll never use it item. And then I remembered this series, and it's the absolute perfect time to use these, because instead of having to write on Post-it notes, I can actually just use the emojis as reference to if I like it, if I don't like it. So of course we can do the heart face for if I'm really in love with what's going on. We can do the sad face if I'm emotionally pulled by the story. I can do this bored face if I feel really disconnected from the story, and I can use this poop emoji if I just really hate what's going on. And I hope that I won't have to use that a lot, but I haven't read the book in 6 years at least, probably closer to 8. I'm pretty sure I read it my sophomore year, so we will see.
Don't give up so easily.
checking in right at the halfway mark. I'm on page like 151 of 302. So I'm going to be talking about some things that I didn't like, but it is not negative to the book. I'm actually really enjoying the book. I'm really enjoying the premise, and I don't want to give off the impression that I am not. But there are so many cliches in this book, but back then they weren't cliches. There are some things, though, that I can't seem to ignore. Things like, on the first day of school, she met the hottest bad boy and the mean girl who doesn't like her for no reason. And yes, at one point that was the hype and that's what everyone was talking about. So things like that I can almost forgive. But the hot, aloof bad boy and the smart, active guy in their school immediately on day one had this love triangle over her. Like, she just popped up and they were both like, the new girl, I claimed her. And they're like staring at each other over her head. And that was really weird to experience and I did not enjoy it. I have 5 little tabs put in, and 3 of them are board faces, and 1 of them was at that scene. Another one was an instance where characters had very similar traits. So the one guy drove her home and he was talking and he was like drumming on the steering wheel, and then in the exact same wording, in the exact same sentence structure, another like character was also drumming on the steering wheel, and it just felt like too similar, especially because it happened within like 10 pages of each other. So it really drew attention to the fact that they were just reusing like little quirks and recycling them. It just made the characters not feel that different. But the beginning, I don't know if I mentioned this in my first intro clip, the beginning has all these cliches and it's sort of in a high school setting, and it does eventually get into a more fantasy magic setting, and it hasn't gotten there yet, but the writing has almost increasingly got better. And I don't know if it's because I've gotten used to the author's voice, which that might just be it. I might have just gotten used to the way that she writes and she describes things, but I think maybe Miss Carrie Jones is very strong at world building and is very strong at like plot development, but maybe the character introduction or the inciting incident area just isn't her strong suit. So the beginning was really slow and really hard to focus on, but so far in that like second quarter of the book, I've had a lot of parts where I really relate to how the characters expressed emotionally, and that has been really nice to read. So I understand why I liked it whenever I was younger, but I also feel like I'm constantly reminding myself that this must have been written for a younger audience. And yes, YA in the last like 5 to 6 years has had a shift from like the 13 to 18 age range to the early 20s, like late teen age range. This is definitely like a somewhere between 11 and 15-year-old book. And the reason I say that is there are a lot of instances where things feel really explained. And readers are smart. We pick up on it. We don't need reminded, or we don't need like the extra explanation for things that have happened before that are just like happening again. And when I say that, I mean things like, oh, the mean girl is being mean, and she had asked her friend, like, I don't know why she doesn't like me, and her female friend was like, oh, she hates everyone who she thinks is a threat. And then several pages later, she was like, oh yeah, here's that girl again that doesn't like me, like, I don't even know what I did to her. And then her male friend, who has a totally different personality, was like, oh, she just doesn't like anyone who's a threat. Like, it's very unlikely that the 2 different people would say the exact same thing in the exact same way to describe somebody. No matter how close they are, I feel like they would have a little bit of a variation. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're just driving points home. Like, they want to express that she's the mean girl in the school and stuff, but I don't need to be told that. I would rather be shown that. But I am very into the part of the story I'm in now, right around 150 pages. She's starting to learn that the people in her life and the people around her know a whole lot about what's going on, but they're not sharing. And it seems like they're just going to be about to share sort of what's going on with the Pixies and everybody. So I'm really looking forward to the next part, because the awkward character introductions where you're explaining everybody's role in the story has kind of come to an end. And from now on, it's just developing the plot and experiencing like the magic. This is like my favorite part of stories, whenever we start to get answers to the things that we're building up in the first part.
Your eyes and see there's more to our story.
Alright, Alright, so I came out here, guys, because there was a cat laying here being absolutely adorable. So I came out here to shoot and to have him in the video, and as soon as I set everything up, he ran away, and that was really heartbreaking. But this is normally like my little reading square, so it was more fitting to be out here anyway. But I was in fact correct about my prediction from the last clip. It did get into a part where there was a lot more enjoyable content. I still feel like a lot of the characters are coming across as a little bit 2D, but I really like the plot, and I really like the premise, and I really like some of the stuff that's happening. The only thing that's happening in the book right now that I don't necessarily like are there were two particular instances that I can think of. The one, the main protagonist, she's a girl, she kept describing this guy as cute. Literally just the word cute. No variation, no other adjective, no other description. She wasn't even admiring something he was doing that was cute. She was just like, he's cute. And she thought it, and it was written in prose, and she also said it, and it was so just weird, and it felt a little bit dry. Then there was an instance where one of the characters was very obviously revealed to be a little bit less than human, if you know what I mean, or I shouldn't say less than, that's a little bit degrading. Something other than human. He was revealed to have some other genetics, and it was, in my opinion, a very obvious show of this is who he was. And I know that not everyone catches on to things as fast, and even if this was written for a younger audience, the protagonist acted like she was so dumb for 3 pages. She was like, oh no, where's the, what happened to the, oh no, like you have to explain to me what happened because I don't get it, in a way that really just wasn't believable. I feel like I personally was like, how do you not just know what was going on? And I get that it was a shock and she should be shocked, but it didn't really relay that she was shocked. It relayed that she was dumb. So this book has become a little bit of a guilty pleasure for me. I have about a quarter of it left, about 75 pages, and I really am enjoying it, but it's just something that the writing craft-wise isn't the best, so I can't really just give it to somebody and say, hey, this is an amazing book. I feel like it's always like, hey, this is a great story, but it's written to a younger audience, or it's like downplayed a little bit in the way that it is written. But I do love what is happening, and I definitely think that I am going to continue reading the rest of the series. So I can't say that it's something I don't like, because I'm going to read Captivate and Entice probably right after this, but I'm just enjoying some of the originalities about what's happening. So instead of having just fairies and humans, there are 5 different races that I mentioned, but so far we've only encountered pixies and humans, and I like that pixies are written differently than fairies, and I think a lot of books and a lot of lore either confuse the two or combine them, whereas fairies are these little trickster creatures, and pixies are depicted to be almost the same thing. In this book, fairies are creatures that have the innate sense of good, and pixies are creatures that have the innate sense of evil, or that's what we know about them so far. So I'm going to read the last 75 pages and share my final thoughts with you guys before I continue on through the series. The next book is Captivate. So I'm probably not going to include my reading and vlogging of Captivate along with this book, just because the video would probably be a lot of the same of, I appreciate this thing that's happening. This part is something that I would definitely like to do better in my own writing, but also because the length of the video would just probably be too long and honestly too boring. But as the first book in my Reliving series, I am really glad that I did pick this up again, and I'm really glad that I gave it another chance, and I do still like it. I'm not going to say that I was as swept up as I was in it when I was in high school, because I do remember pouring through these books and being absolutely obsessed with what was happening. I don't have those same feelings, but I am really enjoying the way things are moving and the way the plot is structured. It is very suspenseful, on top of giving me some valuable tips through writing craft of things that I want to make sure I watch out for in my own work.
Open up to me, don't give up so easily. Open up.
Alright, this is the last installment of our Reliving Need series. I've been really bad about putting those post-it notes in. I really do enjoy this system. I've been dog-earing the bottom of the pages though, because I was doing a lot of reading at work and while I was out, and I didn't have the post-it notes with me. So I forgot to put some of those in, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to give you my recap and my sort of feelings and opinions about the last quarter of the book, and then I'm going to go over some glows and grows of things that I really either want to do better in my book or things that I really enjoyed and want to make sure that I do as good in my book. I am a firm believer that the more you read, the better you write. So every book you read that you love is a little lesson in what to do right, and every book that you might have adverse feelings about is a little lesson in what do I need to watch out for in my own manuscript. So my opinions of the end of this book. I kind of waited a week before I filmed this little clip just because I had to let my confusion and sadness settle a little bit so I wasn't too critical, but I'm really not buying the way that the protagonist sort of conquered the antagonist in the end. I have so many questions of, well, why didn't the antagonist just do this? Or why didn't they just do that? Why is this thing affecting them? I also had the sense that with the creatures in this book, the pixies, it really felt like all the characters read the same Wikipedia page. Even the antagonist and the pixies themselves. All of the words and descriptions we knew about the pixies were reiterated word for word throughout the entire book. So the reason it's neat is because the pixies have a specific need, and the protagonists know very little about it. So of course they're repeating the same thing over and over again. But the second the antagonist was like, I'm sorry, you have to forgive me, it's because I have this need, then it became sort of fake sounding, if that makes sense. But some glows and some things that I really did enjoy about this book that I want to make sure that I carry over to my own writing is the uniqueness of the creature they chose. Pixies don't get talked about very much, and whenever they do, it's usually in very similar ways, reiterated and with little spins and stuff. Nothing that was as different as what Carrie Jones did in this book. So in this book, the pixies are a separate creature, and they have like their own little society and roles of how the society runs and functions, and that makes it a lot different than they're just the little tricksters in the woods. And that was really nice, and that was really enjoyable to see. So my little lesson in what to do better in my manuscript is whenever I'm writing, I'm going to pay a lot of attention to dialogue and making sure it's realistic, and I'm going to pay a lot of attention to words and phrases that are either overused or might sound repetitive. But overall, this was a really fun read, and if you had fun watching this video, or if you even enjoyed this topic, the next book we're going to go through and reread is Wither, and I actually had to buy this book because what happened was I had gotten it from the library, and this happened a lot with my books from the high school years. I would get the first copy from the library, like the first book in the series, and then if I liked it a lot, I would buy all the rest of the books in it. So this is Wither, and it's part of the Chemical Gardens trilogy. I know it's a little hard to see the words. I really like this cover. It's very eye-catching. The next book is Fever. I know in my last clip I had said that I'm going to be reading Captivate right after Need, but the way that Need ended, I don't really have an urgency to move right into Captivate. So it's because it's a book I own. I think it's probably going to sit on my shelves a little while longer. I am currently reading Leigh Bardugo's Ninth House, and I'm listening to All the Stars and Teeth on audiobooks, and I think this Wither is going to end up being my next book to like physically read, and I just am feeling like a little bit of a break from the Need world, if that makes sense. So if you are interested in my thoughts about Wither, or you enjoyed this vlog style video on rereading and reliving Need, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you'll be notified whenever I post this video.